everybody. Welcome to The New Normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Litecoin Lisa. Today we have Trekkw2ks joining us. You guys know him from Gentlemen with Crypto. He's also on my friend Crypto Blood's show with his 2 satoshis. So join us. Make sure you click the like button and share this video. Get this out there, and let's see what he's up to. Welcome to the show, Trek. How are you?
How's it going? We've had a lot of back and forths in Twitter to get to this point.
We got to chat a little bit when we saw each other and met in person out in Miami at the Monero event. So I was glad to get to meet you there. And I've seen you on Gentlemen of Crypto, and you've interviewed my friend Reggie Middleton that I'm on the, I get to interview him on the Veritasium DAO channel. And then you're also on my friend Crypto Blood's show doing your 2 satoshis. So I feel like I have, I kind of know you, but I don't know you. And so I was excited to bump into you and then get to invite you on my show and introduce you to my community. So I wanted to kind of, I guess, start from the beginning. How did you get into crypto? Where'd you hear about it?
Ooh,
when?
Okay, so what I realize about being in as long as I have, when I say the time period, people make certain assumptions.
Okay.
And so usually I try to avoid the timeline period of other people. So I've been around for a bit.
Sure.
I will say that I will give at least like the thing that got me the initial spark. There was a radio show. If you are from the metropolitan area, being New York, there's a radio show called Off the Hook. It was basically like a white hacker show. Well, we didn't even say white hacker back then, but the point being is, it was an episode where they were talking about like, so what do you think of this digital money thing? What do you think of this crypto thing? And all I heard was Bitcoin, internet money, and I instantly ran off to Star Wars. And I was like, wait, Federation credits? Like, it's going digital? What? My brain just started running. I don't remember none of the rest of that episode. And the show was like an hour at the time. And that was the initial, like, the spark was there. I did not act.
Okay.
I didn't know nothing about mining. I didn't know any of that stuff. Maybe like a year or something later, I then actually do take action. And I wasn't in the Charlie Sherm era where like you had to send in the money order and do all of that. Like by the time I started being active, ATMs, they weren't widespread, but they were around.
But you could find it. Yeah.
Right.
So you're in the you're based in New York area. I didn't even know where you were from. I didn't know if you were a Miami local. I didn't have a clue.
You know, it's funny. I used to live in Miami when I was younger. Originally, I am from New York. I'm from Brooklyn, but right now I'm in the DMV area. So, yeah,
What's DMV area?
Oh, sorry. DC, Maryland, Virginia.
Oh,
so I'm up on the Maryland side.
Okay, I know where that is. Interesting. Okay, so you've related it to Star Wars Federation credits?
Yes.
And that's hilarious. That's the first time. That's the first for my crypto journey questions. I've never heard somebody relate it to a Star Wars Federation credit.
So okay, let me put the thought process.
Give me some perspective on that. Yeah.
Because at the time, unless you were like heavy techie, no one was talking about how money was working digitally. Like how currency was working digitally speaking, right? So we're not talking about Google Pay, Apple Pay, tap and go. Like
Yeah,
none of
none of
that
that
is
was going on then.
right. And the only other place where you had the idea, the concept, and some kind of implementation was in sci-fi, was in cyberpunk TVs and movies.
Right, because even video games weren't doing. I mean, there wasn't Xbox then with credits or any of that really.
You see what I'm saying? So like,
Yeah.
if you look at it from that standpoint and go, well, where does money like this go? Where does it exist
What
that we
application would
understand
it be
it?
used in? Yeah.
Now, the closest thing you had was you was either watching Star Trek, Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
Firefly, or Babylon 5, or like whatever other thing that was sci-fi that was going on. And the funny thing is, I look back on it now and I kind of laugh about certain stuff because in Star Trek, when you get to the later years where they have like Jean-Luc, the Ferengis are the only ones that use a currency. None of the other species use currency. But if
What's a
you were real Trekkie,
Ferengi?
you know what I'm talking about.
Okay. So
All right.
hilarious that your name is Trek. Is
Yeah.
that part of it? Is that you're
So yes,
Trek because you're such a Trekkie?
I'm not even going to say I'm a hardcore Trekkie. I'm not. What was the other thing that got me in the all right, so I come up in the first decade of the crypto thing, and this is the period of where like you can have whatever kind of name you want in the space. So you have case in point, like Coin Lisa, Rice, Rice Crypto, who is now Rice. What is it? Rice TV.
Rice TVX.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, another friend
Bitcoin
of ours.
Zay, who's actually Isaiah Jackson. Like you have all of these pseudonyms that people are using, which falls into the same thing as far as if you're an actor, if you're a writer. And that was just kind of the norm for what was going on. But I wanted something different. I didn't want to be locked into a crypto thing, in part because I thought bigger than, and I don't know how smart I was in this, but it was like, well, I mean, can I really talk about crypto forever? Because at a certain point, it's just going to be an everyday thing. So there's no point in attaching myself like that to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And before I decided to actually say, let me be public in the social media world, in the content world, I was going a lot of different places, right? So I was going to meetups in Philly. I was going to meetups in DC, doing meetups in Baltimore. I would go to other macro and micro events. And it was a whole thing of like taking the journey. But then I was like, I want to say it better than taking the journey. I'm on a trek. And
cool.
and then also I do like Star Trek. So
that
it was like the nod on that, and then it works for how I was moving around in the space, which was all right. There's a meetup in this city, I'm gonna go over there. There's a conference in that place, I'm gonna go over there, and I was getting around.
So the meetups and the community piece is really important to you as well.
Yes. So it's a double-edged sword, though. It's a double-edged sword, and I'll say it's a double-edged sword because what you then not. What I initially was taking into account when going to the different meetups is you had the different like the niches and like the different little accents that were going on. So for example, in the before 2019, if you went to a meetup in Philly, it could be at the diviest dive bar ever.
Okay.
But it will be some of the most high level techie coder level conversations.
Right.
Where when you go into DC and you were I forgot what part of DC that was, but like you go X amount of DC stuff and it was more like, well, how are we talking about this? Like it was more political, and then it was more of a financial conversation in relation to how regulation will eventually move in. And like the DC folks were having that conversation really, really early compared to if you went to like a Baltimore meetup where it was like a combination of people who some folks wanted to be before we were calling people degens, there was the degen folks. And then there were the
Right.
people who were like, well, no, but at some point the law is going to come into this. Like, we got to start working on the things with these regulators. And then you had the other people who were not more entrepreneur, but just looking at it like, well, I'm just going to start the business and then we're going to see where it goes when the regulators get here. And Baltimore is an interesting animal in
Okay.
that there is a lot of talent in Baltimore, right? But it has this siloism thing to it that I've not seen in any other city that I've been to, the way it is here in this in Baltimore City. Sorry, and then like compared to like New York, where there's the eccentric folks, there's the artistic folks, there's the money bag folks, there's the high sedity folks, there's the law talking folks, there's the like, how we gonna make the next, like, how's the next flip gonna happen? Okay, we got this. Like, you, and it's funny that you can still be connected to X amount of people, and then there still be a couple 100,000 people that you just have no idea that they're there, because New York is so compact and like, it's a lot of people there, but not everyone knows everyone. But it's still X amount more connection, I would say, in New York compared to a Baltimore. But this is
Interesting.
also looking at it for when I got in and I was moving around to the different events. And then we also had our 2-year break because of C19.
Right.
So, you know, that whole period changed everything, because then we got into streaming and internet stuff, which was a whole different animal for socializing and going to meetups, or like even doing the online summits, in which we then called webinars. You
Right.
know, the networking and the socialization, it turned into a different animal. Here's an interesting thing that I noted, like when the whole C19 thing started and we started getting into the live streaming, or, you know, doing the Zoom stuff. I remember how in the beginning there was this whole like negative spin on like, oh, well, you know, if you go to a crypto meetup, it's usually in some kind of bar place. And DC was where I heard it the most, on how they would like down talk it. It was the
Mm.
male place of bastion, and it wasn't cool anymore at a certain point to go to or to hold something in a bar or a lounge, right?
Oh.
And then, ironically enough, C19 happens. All of a sudden, who's doing booze in crypto? And I'm not, let me be clear on something. Let me be clear. I am not throwing shots of any kind at blockchain and booze. Okay. My point is that before they got started, I started seeing the trend of how people started jumping out with doing their webinars, their live streams, their little Zoom chats, and like, oh, let's talk about, you know, we'll drink, we'll sip, and we'll talk about crypto. And I remember what it was like before that point, where that was the
It was
downfall.
actually frowned on. I didn't know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we do our happy hour roadshow. It's literally at a bar, and that's where we meet up. But I wasn't aware that that was frowned frowned on. But we've been doing that since the beginning. So I wasn't aware of that. So my personal experience was going to a local meetup here. So my mom gave us, the reason I'm Litecoin Lisa is that when I got married in 2017, my mom gave us crypto for our wedding, and she gave us Litecoin. And so that was my introduction to cryptocurrency. And that's why my name is Litecoin Lisa, because she gave us Litecoin. That was my first coin. And that took us down the rabbit hole of, well, why? And so then we figured out that, like, well, because our money is broken and our system's corrupt, our financial system's corrupt. And like, so that's where this all went. And so, but then I got welcomed by the Litecoin community, which is called the Litecoin fam. So open arms, and, you know, just all these wonderful people, and like had this amazing experience and all this. Well, then, so I go to my first meetup thinking it's going to be like that. And I'm met with like these Bitcoin maxis with pocket protectors. And the dude basically tells me, well, do you know what a smart contract is? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, go home and look it up and don't come back until you figure it out. And I was like, what an asshole.
Right.
Like,
Right.
that is not the way to bring adoption. How is that going to help things? I was just like, so that was part of my crypto journey, was like, we got to change things. This is not going to work, and mom was watching Bitcoin Ben and all that. And so I was like, he was asking, where should I go? And I'm like, come to Oklahoma City. I've got a marketing company and I've got a friend who has a great restaurant. I'll do all your press releases and I'll get on my other friends, radio show and local TV thing, and we'll push it, and I will hold it here. And then everybody came here and we had a great meetup. And then I was like, well, I'm going to do a show too. And if you can be Bitcoin Ben, I can be Litecoin Lisa, and boom, that's how. And then we started going on the road and doing things. And so, but I think when you're talking about those different communities, or what did you call it? Accents,
Yeah.
the different, characters or personalities that are at the different meetups. I think those can be a good thing, in that we all do have those different personalities, and like those maxi pocket protector guys need those spaces, because that's where their creativity is, and that's where they can grow their thoughts and whatever. But like, I also need that place where I can sit and drink with my friends and talk about adoption and foster community and be more open-armed with new people and welcoming. And there need to be those political groups where they're talking about, how are we going to talk to the legislators and, do these things. And I think we need all of those conversations happening in all those different groups.
Okay.
But to not be in silos, maybe at the big conferences, how do you get them to have conversations with each other? Maybe that's the win, is if they can learn to have conversations with each other. Is that what you're thinking?
So the conversations with each other tend to happen, but there also is the growing siloism. And so what was it? There's a couple of things you said that I wish I would have just like wrote down and be like, okay, let me bring up this one, and not like not countering, but like adding in tandem to, like, yes, personally, I've always been the dude that, like, I knew the cool kid, I knew the nerd in high school. I knew the kid that you was like, he's in a special class with, like, the glue sticks and stuff. Like, I wasn't the cool kid. I wasn't the troublemaker. I wasn't the super smart artistic dude, but I knew, and I look at how I move now in this space, and this is like, all right, I know a couple of people, right? And I'm okay with crossing through these different groups. So, hey, I know a couple of maxis. I know some hardcore maxi folks. Oh, do I know some hardcore maxi folks? And then I know the other folks who are just like straight degens. Like, they don't touch fiat anymore at all.
Same.
And then there's the other more business, like, hey, I need to make sure I'm in compliance folks that I know in this space. And so I like being able to move around. And I agree with you. Like, we definitely need to have these different communities and niches, and then have it where they can talk and come to like productive conversations, right? My caveat though, do you know what BBB is?
BDD?
No, BBB. So the God.
Better Business Bureau?
No. So before the internet came into play, there was the BBB, the bulletin boards. I can't remember what the first.
Like a digital BBB?
No. I cannot remember the name of the first thing right now, and I know a number of the folks who were into the early bulletin boards are like blowing off steam right now because I can't remember what it is, but the specific name. My point is that I was alive in that era, but I was not active in that era. And as I've gotten older and talked with other people who were more active on the technical side from back then, what are the things that those conversations, and then a recent documentary that I was watching that I can't remember the name of either, putting the the things together of that early era of that technology before we get into internet, before like this is when people were using their phones to do the bulletin boards through the phone dial-up. But this is not internet. We're not talking about internet. They were
Okay.
right. There was a whole thing that was going on with how the siloism and like whose crew was the best. And in the bigger picture, when I compare it to other things that we as human beings have done in history, it goes into that whole thing of how we have like a competitive nature. And it also goes into how when we get into like what our thing is or what makes most sense to us in our operational environment, we double down, right?
Sure.
And no,
Because
no
our
matter
truth keeps us safe. It has to be right because that we're all in on that, and that keeps us safe. That goes to I mean, I was watching Rethinking the Dollar today. I think Mike is super smart. I don't understand why he doesn't get crypto. I don't understand it. Like, he is bashing Bukele meeting with those 44 banker guys, and he doesn't get that they are not part of the G20 or G7 or whatever, and that they're trying to bring in Bitcoin. And I'm like, oh, Mike, you're so smart. How do you
but
not
okay,
get this? You know, he's like, they're central bankers, you know, and I'm like,
so I don't know Mike personally, right? But it's one of those
no, I don't either, but I think
if
he's very smart.
if your whole setup is based on the fiat
Silver. So
side.
no, he's not into fiat. He's a big gold silver guy.
Oh, okay, then
And
same,
so
same
he's,
thing though. It's the same thing. Like
yeah,
that.
same thing. That's
That's
his
his
truth.
operational environment. So it's just like
Mhm.
this is what I know. This is what I'm gonna stick with. And I would even say the same thing for the folks who have been in the space long enough, where there's a certain level of like calcification you get as far as like what things you will explore or pay attention to or even use in the space. And I had to catch myself during the whole C19 period of where for how the DeFi space was moving, and it was rapid trial and error, you know, break it like what is it, move fast and break, or break it fast. And it was amazing to me how fast things were going. And I was like, man, like there's so many new little protocols that they're doing. I don't even know what like 10 of them are right now. My
That's a
point,
great point.
my point to this whole thing is like this is where the whole thing of like being the incumbent comes from, or being the OG, right? I in recent times, I have people say to me like, "Oh man, like you're like an OG in the space," and I'm like, I don't know if I really feel like that's like a title of praise now. In that, at a certain point, when you are in something so long, you get into that siloism, you get into that
You get stale.
calcification. Ha,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Oh, that's a
so
great point.
I gotta catch myself at some point. So like that's why I'm messing around with certain protocols on the DeFi side, why I mess around with some of the play to earn stuff, just to be like, okay, I
I
understand.
saw that on your yeah, I saw that on your Twitter, and so I'm homeschooling my youngest, and that's one of the things. So we're one of his goals, one of our things we're doing in school is he's learning to code with this program we found through MIT online. And one of the things he's doing, one of the things he wants to do is eventually do a play to earn game. And so one of the things he works on is trying to find these play to earn games. And so when I was looking on your Twitter, I saw your, and I didn't know if that was still active because it was from March. So, and in the
Oh,
world of Twitter, March is, forever
yeah,
ago
right,
because
right.
it's May. So I
Okay,
was
you're
like,
talking about the uplift with the Minecraft.
uplift with my, yeah,
Yes.
because he loves I call it Minecraft, but yes, he loves Minecraft.
Okay.
And so I was like, okay, we downloaded that one and it was in Java on his computer. So I think that he
You should
could
have just hit me up.
play
I'd have told
that.
you the whole deal on that. Like
Yeah.
it's not as complicated as folks think. And so what do I say?
Sorry, I got you totally distracted with
No, no,
that.
no,
But
no.
yeah,
Like
but the siloism, and you were
we did
saying
say
like,
like it could go wherever, right?
yes,
We
yes,
said
yes,
that.
it can always go wherever. But yeah, but I think it's great that you're challenging yourself with new things, and that just the fact that you're aware of it, that being an OG and crypto is that thing that kind of turns everything on its head. It's like the old ways. It, you know, it takes that with money and it takes it with everything. It's like we got to this point in history where everything needs to go upside down. And crypto is that point in time where it turns everything upside down. And where, like, in the past, it used to be that if you were an OG, that was badass. Well, now it's like upside down. Now the new thing is the shiny new toy, is the that keeps you fresh, you know? And so I love that you're aware of that. And then you're challenging yourself and you're finding new things. Like, who would have thought that, like, okay, well, it's not the OG anymore. Now I'm doing play to earn games and I'm challenging myself to find new protocols so that I'm watching and looking for the new thing all the time. I think that's awesome.
Okay, how about here's the caveat on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Tell me the other side.
The other side of it is, if you take the time to at least learn enough of, and I try to tell people, or at least I say to people, and I don't do it as like, you need to do blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
I see myself as being Andrasian in my school of thought, where it's, and when I say Andrasian, I mean Andreas Antonopoulos. Like, he was one of the first people that I was
He's a
learning
great
on.
teacher. Mm-hmm.
But the point on that is, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you how to use this technology. I can only say, here's some things that I know based on my experience and based on the conversations I have, and you know, cross-referencing that and what I call qualitative observations and what I see going on outside in this space. And I cross-reference a lot of different things when I come up with whatever it is I come up with about the space, right? So whether we're talking about politics, we're talking about money, we're talking about pop culture, we're talking about history, I cross-reference all of those things together. And when it comes to being like the where was I going? The OG in time, you get to, and Paul, okay, do you know Paul from Edge Wallet?
I do not.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell the story, Paul. So we were at a conference in Latin America, in Chile, in La Big Conf, right? And so we were talking, and he was talking about, like, here's how it started. He said something about how the legalization of marijuana in California had got passed, and he was like, "Well, old people died off," and I was just like, "Wow, that's messed up," the way he said it. But he's making the point of that enough of a newer voting block age came in with a different set of values and mentality on stuff, so that helped to make that transition. Later on in that conversation, not too short after that point is made, he gets into this thing about saying that when he gets older, he knows that he's not going to look to further develop and keep up with the newer technologies. And I was just dumbfounded. Paul's a smart dude. Anybody who knows Paul from Edge Wallet knows he's a really smart dude. And I just couldn't fathom being in technology and then not wanting to learn more or keep up with the new, whatever the shiny thing is.
Right.
Lo and behold, X amount of years later, and I said this to him in Miami, I was like, you know, I still think of the conversation we had about this. He done forgot it. But I know that I've gotten older and I look at it and I'm just like, yeah, this is some of the stuff I don't want to mess with.
There's some things that you stop. Yeah.
Having the bandwidth, then dealing with how much attention and energy it takes when I could be doing it to something else. I could just, like, you know, enjoy being lazy at the moment. And then you get into the part of, like, you've been around so long and you've seen the transition that you go from where you're the pioneer to where you're now the minority and the forgotten, right? And it's just like, all right, you know, from what I've seen and understand about tech and like X amount of other parts of history, like, it's just a natural part of the human cycle.
Yeah.
But
well, and I think that happens in every industry. I mean, I think about even the work that I did in foster care and all that. Literally, I was at a dinner and they were calling me a pioneer. And now I was just at a political event for twshannon, this brilliant Christian conservative guy that is running for Senate, and they're making all this statements about cutting back on in government and all this, and getting big government out of our things like foster care and our services and all this kind of stuff. And these people are talking about foster care and all this, and this lady walks up to me and starts telling me all this stuff about foster care, and I'm like, don't you know who I am? I'm like, I ran the largest foster care effort in the state of Oklahoma for over 13 years. Like, hello. Yep. But I'm a has-been now because I've been out of it for so long. So I totally get that.
Happens. That's hard. But like you're
I
living
don't know
life.
when that happened. Yeah.
You're doing, you grow to a new phase, like you grow to a new interest, you develop yourself to even further for whatever. And like that part of your network or your life or your existence, depending on, who's paying attention, like it either just, it's in the, back corner over there underneath the, 15 tons of paper in a box, something no one remembers, or you only get held to that part back there.
But that's really healthy for the effort though, because then the most excited, energetic people that are active for that effort at the time are the ones that are, being engaged right now. You know what I mean? So that would be the same thing in technology, right? I mean, the ones that are the most excited about, like when Paul is bored with Bitcoin, then, or technology, then, he can go play golf or do whatever. And somebody else is going to be building the next great wallet,
Right. I mean,
and that's really what's great for innovation and what's best for technology.
So, right. Technology it's not a standstill. Like,
right.
What is this? Like 2020, I think it was. Oh, I had a presentation where I talk about how mass adoption is not a one-time event, right? There's a term in mass adoption where they're like, oh, that we've reached mass adoption when oh man, I cannot remember the name of this term that is used to say, okay, well, critical
mass or whatever,
or mass along that line. But there are things that we argue or we say in the modern world, oh, everyone does this. But when you actually start getting outside of the US, when you start getting outside of first tier countries, when you start really going around the world and understand what the population density and numbers are, and how technology as an infrastructure or financial systems as an infrastructure for an economy work in other places, and you start putting things in scale, case in point, we in the Western world say, all right, well, everyone has banking of some form, which is not true. The majority of the world does not have the type of banking system that you would find in Europe or that you would find in North America. Majority. And then when you go into more like, specifics of like looking in those particular regions, you find that a sizable portion of the population does not have access to banking that everyone says is so traditional. So you take that size of population and then you put them with the rest of the world and you realize like, oh, wow, it's not really mass adoption. Mass adoption at this point to me is just a marketing term. And we throw it around way too loosely right now.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
With that said, if that's true, and I believe that it is, then is banking really necessary? So if the majority of people in the world don't have banking, they seem to be doing all right without it.
Okay, so let me caveat that or put that in a certain frame of reference. banking as we understand it in Western and US like culture. It's a difference in regard for like, how to say this? The Amish, well, I don't want to use the Amish. But my point being is that when I say banking, I'm talking about how we understand banking in the American Western context of all of the financial instruments that you have access to via this entity that we call a bank. So we're talking about checking account, saving account, the debit card. You can do the bank card as the other thing. I don't know what banks still do CDs and stuff like that. But if you're looking at, let's say, a bank of here's a central point where someone holds some money for me, you have things like Susus and partners that exist in variations around the globe, right? If you're talking about in the sense of whatever the local currency is, and one person is like the financial head of a household, and they're the ones who hold all the funds for the family. So the wife, the kids, and the second cousin, the first and second cousins. Like it's a lower end,
could be, a form of a bank,
right? But it's not the same context of what we have here in the
what we're
U.S.
thinking of, with mortgages as options,
right? See
financial,
the financial instruments.
Yeah.
That's when it comes into play with that, and
yeah.
like I remember when I realized how we pay taxes here in the States, and then like we deal with things as far as taking out loans and doing a debt thing in order to get a house, right? Where when you go into X amount of other countries and you see people who are like, it might not be the quote fancy house that you kind of attribute to from a first tier country status, but like you're going into like places like Colombia or even Africa or South Africa or Nigeria or Ghana, going to other places like in Eastern Europe, like Kurdistan or like damn, I was about to say Ukraine, but my point is that the way that our system is set up for you to be able to like own the shelter over your head compared to other places, it's almost a racket. Not racket. Is the racketeer the word I'm looking for? I'm gonna say it's set up in a real funny, not funny either, but it is set up in a way that when you compare it to other places in the world, this is like, wow, you did all that work and then they can still take it from you.
And and even after you pay for it all,
yes,
and pay the interest which they created from nothing, they can still take it from you.
Yes,
that's criminal. No, it's definitely, I don't know what to call it, but it's something.
Right. Like, oh, we go.
It's something.
It's something. Okay, so can I ask a question? All right, you've been doing your networking, and you made the transition from what you did prior to where you are now within the space. What has been aside from the initial discovery of crypto, which that is an amazing story that Mom's was really on point with.
My mom's pretty amazing. She's also a badass tweeter. They say she tweets like a 40-year-old. She's Crypto Nana for LTC on Twitter.
I gotta look that up later. Look that up.
She's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Okay. All right. But what has been another pivotal like point for you in this journey within the crypto thing?
Oh gosh. In crypto specifically? Probably like meeting the people, the relationships that have been made. Bitcoin Ben, Big Swear, being asked to host the Veritasium DAO channel, like being embraced by the community and supported that I get for the channel, and being able to, the other thing is the validation that I get, like when I'm finding this information, like I'm consumed with the news and the truth that I find from crypto. So because I found out about how corrupt our financial system is by understanding what money is and how our financial system is broken, because crypto enlightened me, then I found out about the rest of what's going on with our government and our health system, our school system, our medical system. My daughter passed away at 7.
Sorry.
So we adopted her. She received a heart transplant at 3 months old. And then we had the wonderful blessing of having her for 7.5 years before she was passed away from cancer. And that was from her transplant medication giving her cancer. And so I'm sure that's from, big pharma. And so then I'm watching how like they want us to be sick and they want us to be dependent on them, and just this. And so it just enrages me to see this system that's created. I don't know if you can hear all the thunder. That's from me being so mad. No, there's thunder outside. There's a big storm tonight. But watching me see, and so when I find out this truth, and then, following Uncle Cliff and then having him reach out to me and like those kind of things, and being affirmed by people like that. Yeah. And so we're friends now and email each other, and like that kind of stuff, finding the truth, and then having not only the community, but people that I look up to and respect like that.
It got you. Yeah, it took it. Are you gonna come back? All right, damn. Okay, I'm gonna wait it out. Wait it out.
There's a very big chance that the worst is not over yet. The worst is not over yet. The liquidity on the books is looking super thin. You got big companies like Cisco and Target and Walmart missing earnings, missing guidance and whatnot. So it's looking bad. It's looking really bad. You got a lot of uninformed investors talking about buy the dip, but they don't really know that the books are very thin. A lot of people are on the sidelines with the cash on the sidelines. So let's see what happens. If you want to look at this at a broader point of view, we need equilibrium. We need balance. Water can be good and bad. Fire can be good and bad. Things can't go up forever. Things have to come down. Things have to, recalibrate so that the markets can actually, do what they're supposed to do properly. There's a very big chance that the worst is not over yet. The worst is not over yet. The liquidity on the books is looking super thin. You got big companies like Cisco and Target and Walmart missing earnings, missing guidance and whatnot. So it's looking bad. It's looking really bad. You got a lot of uninformed investors talking about buy the dip, but they don't really know that the books are very thin. A lot of people are on the sidelines with the cash on the sidelines. So let's see what happens. If you want to look at this at a broader point of view, we need equilibrium. We need balance. Water can be good and bad. Fire can be good and bad. Things can't go up forever. Things have to come down. Things have to, recalibrate so that the markets can actually, do what they're supposed to do properly. There's a very big chance that the worst is not over yet. The worst is not over yet. The liquidity on the books is looking super thin. You got big companies like Cisco and Target and Walmart missing earnings.
Wow. That was dope.
Did you turn on TK?
I did.
Oh, okay. I thought I left it on.
Oh man, I guess that was the end of that, boys and girls. Alrighty. Oh shoot. Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, I was just about to DM you to be like, well, I guess the lightning didn't want you to finish talking.
Hello, hello.
I can hear you.
Oh gosh, I think that lightning might have like hit my house. Oh my gosh. Do what?
Do you have the grounding rods?
I don't know. My husband's mining with that. What's it called? Is it helium?
Mm-hmm.
And now that's the second time that I think our house is hit.
Wait, you have it on the roof, or you have it in your like?
It's like on the side of the house.
Yeah,
on the roof.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that he grounded it.
Oh, I'm sure it's grounded. Yeah.
Yeah, so it should be okay.
It's up. Oh goodness. Anyway, that scared me. Like everything dark. Okay. What were we talking about? I think we said something about Uncle Cliff, and then the house.
Oh, I had a thought. Okay. So before I forget the Cliff thing, so do you remember the report that Cliff has said? This is before 2019, when this is a little bit before he stopped doing the reports.
So we have all of them. My mom's been following him for years and years and years,
Right.
and she has all of them.
Okay.
So
do you remember the one where he was talking about how the U.S. military would be overseas and they wouldn't be able to leave a country or leave the European region because either it was something like the locals wouldn't take the money and they ran out of fuel. So the military that was wherever they were in that region wouldn't be able to leave.
No.
Okay.
Was it in the Roaring 20s one? Was it in the Roaring 20s or the report or the?
It might have been in the Roaring 20s. I do know it was something he said like not too long before he just stopped doing them.
Because that was one of the last ones. Okay, I'll have to go back through and look.
Yeah. So I bring that up on the end of, if you look at this Russia situation with Ukraine and where Russia sits for how the gas deals are working out, like it's one thing for what they push here in the States and saying what is going on in Europe's dealing with Russia, Ukraine's itself dealing with Russia and the other, powers in that area who need fuel. But when you listen to some of the outside stories, or at least people who are paying attention to those
sides. Well, the other thing is that Sri Lanka. So I was looking at Sri Lanka defaulted on their debt. 3 days before they defaulted, they ran out of petrol. So Washington just ran out of fuel. So I was like, oh, watch for
special reserves thing.
Do what?
Out of the special reserve?
I don't know. I just saw an article saying that like the state of Washington just got like their last delivery or was reporting that they were running out of. And I don't know if it was Washington D.C. or if it was the state of Washington now.
Okay.
Was saying they were running out of fuel, but it makes me wonder. Okay, when you're saying, so we know that Russia is forbidden to pay back their debt basically because of the sanctions, because the contract for their debt is that they're supposed to pay back their debt in USD, but the sanctions are that they're not allowed to buy USD.
Right. Right.
So that could be part of that in play, right?
So how I was thinking about it was because in that region, because part of what's going on right now is that X amount of the European countries who need fuel are going through third parties to act on their behalf.
Okay.
Some of the countries have just like ponied up and they went and got a bank account with, I cannot remember the name of the banking facility, in order to be able to get the rubles. But
Okay.
the major names are doing the front thing. They're doing the proxy thing of where someone else is buying on their behalf, who's on the friendly list. Because Russia now said, "Hey, we have
Right.
a
You can
friendly list, and
only.
we have to like, nah, we don't mess with you no more."
Yeah. Right.
Right. But what? So there's a large there's a large enough size contingency of American soldiers that are in Europe, or American military people that are in Europe, in the more garrison type style settings, not active theater as far as it being something like a South Korea or like the outskirt parts of Iran or Iraq or whatever. Right?
Okay.
So there are like people or bases still in certain eastern parts of Europe. And so if in my mind, unless the US is supplying their own fuel in and they're not doing anything in relation to the local market and getting it from the state level. So the
I see what you're
military
saying.
posts are
How are
buying,
they going to get fuel to those military people
right.
without purchasing and using rubles to do that?
So you have it that and I don't know the actual procurement process. I will say that I do not know the actual procurement process. I'm not, I forgot what they call well, that's at least on the Army side, but
Okay.
the person who deals with that side of it. But my point is that if they are having it where they're not bringing in the supply of fuel needed to run these military operations, and the bases are buying from the local government who has jurisdiction, what happens when the government of that country gets cut off?
I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying?
Was that a temporal marker for something else, for another issue, or he just saw, or the web bot just saw that was just in the report? Do you remember?
I don't remember if it was a temporal thing. I just know that he had brought up a point about the U.S. military being someplace and they couldn't leave because it was a fuel issue, and then there was also a money issue, as far as like money being accepted, the USD being accepted in particular. And so today I think it was today I was driving and I was just like, hey, Cliff High report. And then it just started going off in my head. I was like, you know what? I got to ask. And we happened to talk. So I was like, oh.
That's wild. Oh,
You
well,
mentioned
now I'm
him, and I
so
was
curious.
like, she might know.
I will find out because I'm actually going to my mom's this week, so I'll go dig through some old reports, or you say it's one of the last ones though.
Yeah, so what was that, 2018?
I can do a search actually because I think we've got them all scanned in, so I can do a search on the last few.
So like the carnival for me is like continually active, aside from like when you go to sleep and stuff like that, or really trying to like not think too much, right? And then because of and I'm not gonna say I'm like on everything, as far as like I'm paying attention to everything that's going on within the stock market, what's going on within politics, but I pay attention to at least some of the smarter people who give good breakdowns and context to these different events that are happening, whether they be local, as well as what's going on like on the global scale. I will admit to a degree that I definitely have to work on understanding more of the local things to where I am in Maryland. But and this is a I'm gonna say a sad comment as far as the awareness of the local politics. Like I know some of the faces here and there, but I don't know like their stances and like what was their campaign pledge and that track record stuff.
Right.
So
well,
sorry.
I mean, I think that's one of the things it is important to get involved in. I mean, that's one of the reasons I went to my I was invited by a friend of mine and I went to Shannon's event and I was excited to hear, he's talking about he's into constitutional capitalism and he's a conservative. And it's like, I'm right there with you. And then he's former banker and I went up to him and I was like, you're saying you're all about these three things. And I said, so what are your thoughts on getting rid of the current dollar and getting rid of central banking and, using Bitcoin? And in Oklahoma, our current treasury, there's legislation and they're talking about, and I think either part of, or they're currently backing our state treasury with gold, which then helps us to avoid some of the issues with the federal treasury and avoid some taxes and stuff like that. But he was open to talking about it and listening and learning, which I was refreshing. But he really didn't know about it. And I was like, do you know what constitutional money is? Because he's saying these things, but I don't know, they say they're about the Constitution, but it's like, but have you read it? Do you know what constitutional money is? Because you're a banker. And so I was encouraged that when I was talking to him about constitutional money and, how much percentage of silver is $1 and that these little Federal Reserve notes actually aren't $1. That's not constitutional money. And, he was really open to it. And so I think if we can have more of those kind of conversations, then we do move the ball forward. But the system that we have right now is so corrupt and broken. I almost think it's the go build something new and walk away from the old. You know what I mean? Like at some point,
Okay.
If somebody puts a little caca in the brownie mix, you just have to throw it away. You're not cleaning that up. You know what I mean? You can't clean that up. I'm sorry. It's just true.
I understand you. Like, what is it? One bad apple ruins the whole bundle or the whole barrel or something like that.
That's probably a nicer way to say it. But
I thought you was funny enough.
Yeah, I think you can take a bad apple out. I don't think you can take the caca out of the brownie mix. Like, you just have to throw it out. You just have to get rid of it.
The whole bowl.
The whole bowl is gone.
Okay.
Yes.
So
new brownies.
So I think of it this way. For what's going on right now, that the question or the view that the system is broken. And I remember one of the things that used to always get me when I first started learning about like American history and or not American history per se, but like more about expansion and how colonialism and the thing of people migrating from point A to point B. So from like, the whole Genghis Khan part all the way over to what's the Ethiopian, not the Ethiopian dude. I can't remember the name of the guy right now, but the point being, as far as that, the idea of taking certain actions to either build or maintain and or expand the sovereignty of a state, the sovereignty of a country, of a jurisdiction. And that's when you really start getting into more of like the political agenda, the what is it, the Machiavelli school of thought of things, of understanding like Little Thumb, right, from Games of Thrones.
Oh,
That
okay.
whole thing of, well, Machiavelli, as far as like the book, what is it, The Prince is the name of the book, I think. But like the idea of like political strategy for developing a country, like holding on to your geopolitical power. It's a bigger thought process and exercise, because at least how I look at it now, just because you figure you have your set of, or your what is it, your guiding principles, your moral compass, it doesn't mean that the other side has that.
Right.
And I will say, I feel like the military had got me to understand that a lot more. I'm not saying I agree with all of the military things or the doctrine and stuff like that for how things have played out over the years. But what I'm saying is it gave me a different view on how I look at certain things and why I cherish certain things. So why I'm an advocate for privacy, why I'm an advocate for open source technology that allows you to do things that are more at the granular level of like, this is what you can do as an individual. You don't need to get the permission on the other side. The tech works this way. You have access to it. It's giving me the other view, but it's also giving me a stronger commitment to why I appreciate and value certain things about the blockchain crypto space, the cypherpunk mentality, and just like being a good person.
Well, I think that goes back to where you were talking about the silos and why it's important for them to have a conversation, because that's really true freedom. When you, so I can't have freedom if I don't allow you to have freedom as well. If I'm sitting there saying, well, you hurt my feelings, so I'm restricting you so that I feel better, then really I don't have freedom either. None of us have freedom. If one person in the room doesn't have freedom, then no one has freedom.
So the in practice application of that is, if I'm constantly on the worry about you doing something wrong, I'm spending all of my time, energy, and effort in policing you, so I'm not doing anything else. So
Right.
yeah, like that brings to that whole like chain and ball thing of like, if I'm locking you down, I'm also locking me down.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where the education has to come in, of learning about each other, and the communities have to learn about each other. And I guess that's where the open source thing, the transparency comes in. But then you have the conversation of them, where does privacy come in? Where's the line with privacy? Because yeah, open source sounds great until I really don't think it's any of your business what I do with my money, or what my health status is, or
see, and
you know what I mean?
those get into the human thing, but then there's the other side of the business application when you get into like intellectual property and you know that level of stuff. And it's a weird, not a weird,
but I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. Like, you know, of course we have the Veritasium DAO channel, and we're talking about intellectual property all the time because people are suing Reggie all the time. And definitely, I think, and this is my opinion, that I think in the end, I hope that people will see that Reggie is like a big brother of crypto, and that he'll bring some light to people, that they'll understand that they do need to protect their intellectual property. You can have open source if you choose, but you still need to protect your code, something you create. You need to protect your property with IP or with a patent, because it is your property. Then if you choose to give away your property, that's one thing. But you need to claim your patent or your property so that it's not then weaponized by someone or used for an intention that you didn't, for something you didn't intend.
Okay, so the other day, me and him was talking about this. There's a couple of things that I see in his experience, and not from the end of being a lawyer or having any kind of special insight, and other than just the general conversations we have. Like,
Right.
he's
You're
not giving
just
me the, oh, here's what I'm gonna do next, and da-da-da. Like, no, it's not that stuff, right?
saying.
And then
Yeah.
we're both on the Gentleman of Crypto's channel on YouTube. So we have had conversations in relation to that stuff and then outside stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so he made a point to me the other day in talking about, what is it? You have the common use agreement joint for open source stuff, and then you have the MIT one, and there's like, I think 3 or something other ones. But he was making a point that if IP is for being used in open source technology or open source of anything, right?
Mhm.
To say that this is common use. If the patent is common use, that means you're looking to influence it in a particular direction where you intentionally want it to be open, versus if you didn't do anything, someone could come in and be like, all right, I'm going to close this, right? The simple thing of you wanting to have influence to block others from closing it, that shows that there is some level of validation to IP, to having IP. Because if you didn't have that, and if you didn't put the it's open to the common, like it's open for common use to anybody,
Okay.
then what happens if somebody just comes in and be like, all right, well, I did a patent on that blah 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 amount of time ago, and then they close it for something that was like everyone was using at a certain point. And where I then will go with that is, in his particular scenario for his IP stuff, what I would really like to see happen right now is at least one company to go public to be like, all right, we did a licensing deal.
Yeah.
And I've been doing my own little thing on the back end with, like, on the Twitter side with tagging certain people and stuff. And it's interesting how much everyone's like, well, if he's not suing people, then it doesn't mean anything. And I'm just like, so as opposed to just like, let's do business,
Yeah.
you're
I
gonna
just
say,
think
let's
so
go waste
ignorant.
money in court, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, let's just get straight to business.
It just seems really, yeah. I don't
Like,
understand that strategy either.
that's literally the majority of the responses I get from when people actually say something where it's, yeah, but he's not suing anybody. And then you have the other people who think that he's suing people. And so it's just like, yeah, but he didn't actually say that he was suing, Uniswap or Ethereum or whatever. But people are automatically running, like, some people are running down that. And then there's other people that I've talked to who won't go publicly and say anything, which is the other weird part of this whole
Mhm.
I don't know how your conversations have gone, but I've noticed something.
It's been strange, to say the least.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where either they're like, well, I don't know, the same thing we were talking about with that whole like OG status of the time of being in,
Right.
where there's some people that I've said stuff to, they're like, who is that? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah. And it's like, what do you mean? Who is that? Everyone knows who that is.
right.
Yeah.
And then I've come across some other people who spit some straight viral, is that the word?
Mhm.
Viral, like, you just like, yo, like, are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
in
why are you being so aggressive? Yeah.
right,
Uh-huh.
right. I was in a clubhouse thing like a month or two ago, and I said something, and dude just like jumped down my throat damn near. And I was like, okay, you know what? I don't got nothing else to say, bro. And I
And then
just
you're
like
like, thou
left
dost
the room
protest too
alone.
much.
Right.
Yeah.
The point in the whole thing is, like, I would like to see where the official line gets drawn in the space of, here's what's falling under distributed ledger technology under decentralization, as far as centralized entities and jurisdiction, as far as can you just put out a code, or can you create a device, and if it fits under the umbrella of what's in that patent, all right, go deal with licensing, go deal with courts and all of that fun stuff. If you come up with some other mechanisms and other devices that are over here that did not fall inside the window or inside the wall, like that's the part of the innovation in the tech that I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. Greg Lang from Rivet is a former attorney. He came on. He's not a patent attorney at all, but he was asking some great devil's advocate kind of questions, and he agrees with. Well, I shouldn't speak for him, but we had some great conversation and talked about due diligence, and Reggie's and team at Veritasium did a report on block, and that came out. And so we were having a conversation about that. And that'll come out on the Veritasium DAO channel within this next week, I believe. They're doing the edits on it. But they had just some great conversation about it. And Reggie had some great solutions for some of this, because a lot of the times these are startup companies. So their excuse is they don't have money to pay an attorney to look at to see if they're, infringing or not.
Right.
But then the minute that they do have the money, they're like, we're already up and running, so come get me. And that's kind of their attitude.
Okay.
And so it's like,
okay,
dude, that is not. And at that point, then you have a fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders to be compliant. And so at that point, you're already,
you're setting yourself up for it. But you also got okay. So, and
this is really not
I
good.
I said this to Reggie in one of our last conversations, and I said I think the gameplay. I hypothesize that the gameplay that's being used against him right now in the industry is practically the same gameplay as what the banks do.
It's the same thing that the 3-letter agency that starts with a C and ends with an A does. They
Cowboys into what is it? Cocaine Cowboys something. I can't remember the name.
Sure. I hadn't heard that, but sure. So they distract. They
no, not that one. Not that one.
They give disinformation, distract, disinformation, and if that doesn't work, they discredit. The 3 Ds. So that's the C, and then there's a letter that goes up and down, and then there's an A at the end. And those are the 3 Ds that are used. And that's what's being, I think, used on him.
So that makes sense definitely on the public side as far as the media, the marketing, the branding, narrative stuff. What I'm talking about is the business side.
Oh.
So what I argue is being done is X amount of these companies are looking at it going, and Reggie's made this point a number of times, and it didn't click to me until probably like the umpteenth time I heard him say it. And it was one day, it was just like, oh, wow, this might be the thing. So IP is civil court case situations, right? So generally that relates to just pay up some money versus if you're dealing with like the SEC side, because you violated security, something, pay up money. This is criminal. This is federal. This is like somebody's going to jail probably. Case in point, look what's going on with Arthur Hayes. Well, actually, he's kind of having the house probation thing, but whatever, right? My point is that taking it from the banker's playbook, which is we'll do the things like, money laundering and black books for drug cartels, allegedly, even though there's been court cases, but whatever. And we'll do things like, hyper mortgage, collateral over leveraged loans and all that stuff. And then we'll do all of this stuff until we either get caught by the regulators or the bubble of whatever that market thing is breaks. And usually what you see happen is it runs out until one of these two things happen. I would argue that X amount of these companies in the blockchain crypto space took the assessment when maybe one law firm, maybe some people are just copying off of someone else who actually went to a law firm and was like, here's what I want to do. What kind of case would I deal with if the law comes after me? Is it going to be civil or is it going to be criminal? If it's criminal, somebody's going to jail. If it's not criminal, case in point, the IP stuff, and Reggie makes the point of, well, you're going to owe me compensatory damages. I'm like, yeah, but look at the example of this. For all of the banking company, institutions that got in trouble during the 08 situation and for all of the housing crisis stuff, when they end up having an issue and whoever got in trouble because they finally got noted, what did they do? They paid the fine and they kept moving. I think the companies in the space are looking to do the same thing. They're going to
it's like a car company that knows they're going to kill X number of people and they figure out how much the deaths are going to cost them and they don't call the recall.
And you bake that into what's going on in your cost. That's a part of your budget line item.
But why don't they go to Reggie with that dollar amount now and just make that the negotiation of the license?
Think about how the mentality of the people who are behind that right now. It's a lot of bank money in there. There's a lot of front companies in there that are for other bigger institutions or bigger named entities, right? And everyone on that. And I argue another thing in the general overall economy is that the baby boomers are making their exit out of certain sectors and they're leaving everything after the baby boomers to hold the bag when the economy goes down. Because in my opinion, based on some of the things I listen to and pay attention to, we're dealing with a recession, but the government and like the bigger brand name companies that have like a voice in the public narrative, they aren't publicly officially acknowledging it because they're still trying to work out like, how do we put the capital flight controls in? How do we deal with where we can start hiring freezes and like start downsizing the company without doing like
freaking
a overnight? Exactly.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So like,
yeah, because energy never dies. So it's just that money's going to change hands, but they don't want to freak everybody out. So how do they change hands without setting off a fire alarm? Yeah.
And so now look at Reggie's situation and how I am personally hypothesizing this is that they're like, all right, one, we'll make as much money as we can right now. We know that we can pay the fine when the thing happens, right? Eventually, if we hit the wall, we'll pay the fine. Or all of a sudden, we'll have this huge ass hack and, oh, the DAO's defunded and we can't do anything anymore. Like, stuff like that. Oh,
you mean like Terra Luna's emergency button? Or what did he call it?
Somebody wrote the contract and sent it to the wrong address and now it's frozen forever.
Yeah, I shared the video where it says that publicly. He's like, well, we always had this emergency button that if whatever happened, we can push the button and shut the whole thing down and take all the money out. And I was like, he literally said this out loud on a video.
Yep.
Like pulled the plug. And people are still like, oh yeah, they're gonna fork it and fix it and I'm gonna buy some more. I'm like, oh, people.
Right. And so I look at it this way too, because Reggie also said something that I didn't think about until he said it with how he explains stuff. And this goes into the other thing of they're running up the bill until they actually have to pay. So one, you make your money. Two, you pay out the VCs who were backing you. So they get their stuff so they can get out. And then
Okay.
3, you go through enough trial and error iterations of figuring out the technology itself and the different variations of business models that you can do. In this whole time, you'll then at some point be like, okay, here's what we know falls in that patent. That's what I think is going on in his particular scenario, is
So
that they're running up
they're
the clock. Yes.
okay. So they're recreating it so many times over so that then they can recreate it outside of the patent, is what you're saying?
Yes.
These other companies?
Because think about how fast DeFi and the number of protocols that have
Mhm.
come out over the last 3 years. Like all of a sudden, we were moving relatively slow for 2019 on DeFi. And then when
Mhm.
2020 came in, it was just like, oh, there was a new yield farm that popped up for a week. There was at least 50 that popped up for a day. There was the liquidity pool variations. It was so many different trial and errors on financial instruments based on using smart contracts, based on using what is the base point of his patent? An exchange of value
Right.
using digital mechanism or hardware device.
So they're trying to drag this out. They're trying to ignore him as long as they
As
can
long as possible because
and
it's
as
only
long as
civil.
possible and outrun him.
And then like somebody's eventually going to be like, all right, bet we made enough money. We got the VC folks out. Now let's like run for what the longer sustainability of developing the technology is going to be. But for right now, I'd argue it's all a money grab. Who can get all of what they can get out between now and like 2025? Extreme time is like 2030. But that's what
Wow.
the way that I look at it and how I put things together for it. And I've heard other folks who've been around longer bring up the point of like, yeah, like these companies are going in and they're talking to law firms and they're getting assessments. And I remember when I used to talk to other lawyer people I knew from like the 2017 to the 2019 period, you know,
Mhm.
like you had law firms just throwing out these assessments of like, oh yeah, you'll be good to go. That's not a security. The vast majority of those companies are not here now, but a
Mhm.
whole new slew of startups came in their place. Like, and those folks now who are either the new folks who weren't here for the 2017, 2015 period, they have a different mindset of, well, I'm just going to try whatever because I don't want to go back to like doing the regular work stuff because crypto is going to be the new wave. And then you have the other folks who they were around for that period. They learned X amount of their lesson. Was like, all right, well, the laws now defining that we can't do that thing. So I'm gonna come over with this variation. And like again, like blockchain isn't a one-time all. It's just going to be this way forever. It's a
Right.
whole bunch of iterations going on various protocols, on various blockchains, various consensus mechanisms. So like I look at this space and I say the whole thing is really just a big experiment on how can you use a new variation of data storage that gives you provenance that can also work in you being able to have direct control as far as a property right thing. We just have these different use case applications around it, but it's all basically data storage.
Right. And it's always going to be changing. That's literally the definition of it, is that it's stacking on each other. So it's
Mm-hmm.
always the next thing, the next best thing.
Ooh, okay. So jumping back to something that you said earlier in when I was saying about the OG thing.
Mhm.
So the other part that I would say is like kind of that, excuse me, it's a double-edged sword of you've been in long enough to see the phases and the changes and the growth and the development. But you've also been in long enough to understand what it was like to be able to have X amount of your own direct influence and control in the technology as it's developed with these new conveniences, and what you've lost over time because part of the thing with technology, which is like inherent to its nature, is being able to make it more convenient versus less technical. And in order for you to do that, you have to strip away X amount of things, right? And so when I look at a number of the things that are playing out as far as being marketed as DeFi in this space or marketed as Web3, I will say I am not a coder level person, but I've been around and understand enough to be like, oh, that's not actually DeFi. They can reverse the transaction. They have the dev backdoor codes on that particular stable coin. This company that markets as the best place to be a degen is really just lying to you because they can block off your whole user experience. Like, what is it? What's the name of the place? Robinhood.
Yeah, Robinhood.
Like, you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And so you see the things, and then you try to tell other folks, like, listen, that's not really getting you outside the walled garden.
Right.
It looks fancy as hell. Not gonna lie, it does.
Well, it's like Jerome Powell using the term cryptocurrency for CBDCs. Makes you just want to scream and pull my hair out. Yes. I mean, it's such a distraction and manipulation and, yeah. But Robinhood supposedly is creating a wallet for you to hold your own crypto off of their platform. I was like, would you trust that from those people?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. You know what's interesting about what's his face? I think his name is Vitalik. It's something with a V.
Vitalik, yeah.
So
the guy who did ETH or whatever?
No, not Vitalik Buterin. I'm talking about the guy who's the CEO of Robinhood.
Oh, I don't know who that. I don't know who that
is. So when they had
How many Vitaliks can there be?
No, I think it's something with a V, but I can't remember it right now. My point being is he had when they had the whole Wall Street Bets thing happen.
Okay.
He went on a whole marketing media blitz campaign to reestablish their connection in the markets, right? And I was listening to one of the interviews he was on, and he literally explained how the way that their business model is set up, you don't directly do buys and sells in the app. There's a mechanism that pushes it off to the side, that it goes into this thing that's literally called a dark pool, and that works on the funding of the buying and selling of the stuff. And there's a whole mechanism on the back end that does the market making for them. And so he was saying how, because of how the regulations work, their policy is set up that where if things move in a certain way, they basically have to turn the system off, or at least part of the direction of the system, buy or sell. And when he said that, I was just like, wait a minute. So he basically just explained how the market and how they have it set up is rigged. John Stewart does another better breakdown of how their back end really, really works with Citadel and stuff. But when I try to make the comment about like, hey, the guy's explaining to you why Robinhood is not meant to work in your favor. And so this whole marketing narrative of like financial inclusion and bringing power to the people, it was a marketing narrative. It wasn't how it technically works. And when I tell you, people like just totally ignore me and try to down talk me in the comments on that video.
Well, it's that thing we talked about earlier about you're violated their truth. And so, and they are going to double down on it. They have a term at Robinhood. They tell them that you get best price. That actually is a term that they created that is not the best price. There's another, that's their pool money. Then there are people that actually get best price that are above them.
Yes.
You're the second tier, you're the next tier, but they call it best price, and it's a total marketing thing. It's just, it makes me crazy. Makes me crazy.
And this is one of those things that when you've been around long enough and you start seeing certain stuff, you're just like, wait, what? No, that doesn't make sense. Or like, no, like that word is soup salad. Like it don't mean nothing. You know,
But I think that's where, and I think that's why we're going through what we're going through now. There's a saying that about, that you can't, it's easier to, is it how, and I'm terrible quoting things, but something about like, it's easier to fool someone than to tell them that they've been fooled or something like that.
I
And
guess where you're going with it. That, yeah, in this day and age,
yeah,
that definitely makes sense.
yeah. If I
Okay.
told you that you had been tricked, you're not going to believe me, but I might be able to trick you.
Right. Okay.
And so I think that's what we're seeing right now.
There's a book called Crystallizing Public Opinion. It's by this guy named Edward Bernays. And he's like a big whoop-de-doo. I want to say he's one of like the earliest like branding, marketing people, but he was doing it on the social engineering scale. And he's nephew to Sigmund Freud. He's nephew to Sigmund Freud.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's why his name sounds familiar. So
Right.
it's like,
But when I read that book, this is probably like maybe 5 years or 4 years ago now. It might have been less than that. It might have been like 3 or something or 4. But that book totally flipped how I started looking at what was going on in crypto and then what was going on in the bigger general of like society, cultural norms, cultural engineering, like social engineering.
yeah.
As a thing, as far as like, how do you socially engineer the American psyche, the American mentality? And when you look at other countries, there are a whole different set of things that I look at now in news and just how people talk about stuff, even for myself, and the things that like I take as this is normal, or this is like, what I see as like the better or right way to do stuff, where it's like, well,
Because your culture taught you that.
right.
As the truth. Yeah. So one of the things that I did, a lot of inner city ministry stuff, because, well, it's a whole another thing. But and one of the most powerful things I read was Ruby Payne's Understanding, the Framework of Understanding Poverty, Culture, or the Framework of Understanding. Maybe it's just called the Framework of Understanding Poverty, but it's by Ruby Payne. And you can sum the whole book up with, there's a chart in the middle of the book, and it talks about poverty culture, middle class culture, and wealthy. And it talks about different things that they value and why. And like poverty culture values relationships. Why? Because that will feed you multiple times. Middle class values being a part of something bigger than themselves. That's why like the national champs hats are for sale at every 7-Eleven, because everybody wants to be part of the national champ team, and every American has a car because they identify as their car and all that kind of stuff. And then the wealthy want to be part of something exclusive. They don't want to be part of everything else that everybody wants. And they want legacy. They want things that last and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. And one is not more or less than the other, but you have to understand where people are coming from, where their truth is, what they value. Like when we started going into inner city, and there was this one family and I was trying to help them. And this little girl would have seizures if it got more than 100 degrees in their apartment. So what does middle class me do? Well, I buy them an air conditioner to stick in the window. And the next week or two when I come back, the mom sold the air conditioner. And I'm like, why'd you sell the air conditioner? It cost me $150. She's like, well, we ran out of diapers and food. And I didn't want to make you mad and ask you for diapers and food. So I sold the air conditioner. And I'm like, I could have bought you $20 of diapers and $50 of food and not sold the dang $150 air conditioner, And but to her, she wanted to protect the relationship. And the thing, you can get more things. Like, so it didn't make sense to her. So my values didn't weren't the same, you know. So
Operational
then
environments.
trying to fix someone because our cultures were different. So we had different truths. So I'm trying to fix her with my culture in her when we don't have the same truths. Like you can't fix somebody but she's not broken. We just
Right.
have a different culture. You know what I mean? And that's where like we have to stop trying to fix each other with our culture. Like
Mm-hmm.
my culture is not right and hers is not wrong. You know, we can help each other across cultures, but we have to respect each other's culture when
Mm-hmm.
we do that.
Real quick,
You know,
is that the last name Pain?
Payne, Payne, Karen Payne. This
Wait,
is really cool.
Karen Payne or Ruby Payne?
Oh, sorry, Ruby Payne. I apologize. I have Karen Purvis on my brain. That's another really good book, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah, Ruby Payne.
Okay.
Payne.
I will definitely be looking this up later.
Yeah, you might be able to Google the chart. It was a really cool. We used it in foster care training a lot because people, especially middle class people that are fostering, you know, they're like they go in and they're exposed to a poverty culture family and they want to fix them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you could explain to them like, well, because they're like, well, I could give that child such a better life, you know, I mean, I can give them better clothes and shoes. And it's like, well, we don't remove because of money. It's not that if that was true, then these wealthy people should be able to come take your kids because they can send your kids to Monaco for ballet and to
Right.
travel the world and, you know, go to Yale and whatever. And all of a sudden they're like, well, my kids are just fine driving a Toyota Corolla. Well, their kids are just fine in their Walmart shoes, you know,
Right.
and, you know, and so you have to help people see that culture is not wrong or bad. It's a truth that we sit in and
Right.
we can help each other and love each other, but we have to respect our cultures and, you know, what that looks like. Anyway.
Like I said, like I feel that for the military and getting around the different places that I've been able to go, and not all like off of deployment level stuff, but just on the idea of like I've always been a person about travel and getting out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that just gave me the more of like, all right, well, I want to see more of the you know the country, the more of the world, and you go places and you're just like, okay, so this is what it's like over here.
Yeah.
And I don't think most Americans understand how like drastic and hard the line is between poverty and okay when you go in other countries. Like, where was I that like kind of blew my mind? I think was that Cambodia? Cambodia definitely kind of threw me off. I didn't go to the capital city, but Cambodia, I enjoyed it, but it was Bangkok. So like, you know, I don't know what city, well, no, you said Oklahoma, but for your major interstate, like, you know how you have the loop, or you might have like the line that goes through.
Yeah.
And so I was taking a bus from someplace, and like I'm looking at it where on this side of me is like the most dopest modern building architecture stuff ever. Okay. But then when I look on the other side of the expressway, it is open sewage, shantytown steel thing right there. And I was just like, what the?
That
Really?
drastic, that close.
And that close. And mind you, Bangkok, I would argue Bangkok is like if you take 40 midtowns of New York City and just be like, squish them right, that's Bangkok. Like the buildings are huge, the traffic is crazy. I mean, it's not crazy like how it is in like Kuwait. Kuwait is funny because they'll have a car accident and just leave the car there and then go buy another car. Like,
what?
Yeah, Yeah,
Oh my
Kuwait's a
gosh.
whole different animal. That's a whole
Okay.
different animal, the sandbox. But
Interesting.
my point being is like I've gone to other places and seen the distinction and the differences. And so when I come back here and I'm just like, I can appreciate that we have gradient levels to how neighborhoods are developed, or I can appreciate that you have X amount of more mobility to be able to go from a have nothing, a lower income person to being able to be more financially stable, more textbook educated, versus in some other places, the funneling gate is way smaller. Here in the States, we have way more opportunities. Granted, it's still, certain issues in the system. I'm not saying there isn't.
Sure.
Be clear on that. I'm not saying there isn't.
But there is
But
somewhat of a safety net or some
yeah, we have some things that for where I've been in other
loans.
places in the world, nah, they don't have that. It's a
Yeah.
stark night and day distinction.
Wow.
You know?
That's crazy. Yeah, I haven't done very much traveling outside of the United States. So that's one thing. I hope this world changes a little bit, that I have an opportunity to do that. Well, you'll have to come on again, and we'll have to do this again, because I really would love to hear some more of your stories, especially hearing about all your travel and hearing what you're doing next. I wanted to share a couple of pages. I pulled up a few of your pages here. The gentleman of crypto that you're on. Oh, look, there he is. Speak of the devil. There's old Reggie Middleton right there. And I like the weekend thing that you do. And I noticed on this one, you're talking about how they seem to put out these things on the weekend or on a
Yes.
Friday or whatever. And so these have a lot of really great information, because you do seem to catch some things that they'll try to put regulation or some really amazing things that happen over the weekend. And so you seem to catch those. So these are great weekend crypto wrap ups. You guys can catch over on Gentlemen of Crypto. And then you can follow Trek at Twitter at Trekkw2ks. And then also over at Crypto Blood's channel when you do your 2 Satoshis. That's pretty awesome too. So check all that out. I'll have all those links in the description of this video. And thanks again for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate that too. Once we finally figured out the day and time, it worked. It worked.
We got it. All right. Well, and I hope to see you at a meetup soon too. So I like that you're out there in the community and making friends and influencing people. So see you next time.